Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. There's people also joining us online. I'm Dan Ryan. This is Lynn Tokarczyk. We've done this presentation a few years ago. There has been some changes, and so we're very excited to tell you about them. So Lynn is going to talk about municipal and state tax incentives, and then I am going to talk about the changes from the most recent the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. And some of the things, mainly with the focus on real estate, but some of the items in there that are pretty compelling. So we'll kick it off. I know we got a late start, but and I apologize about that. But Lynn's going to kick it off, and then I will. After that, we'll go to the federal part of it. So take it away.
Thank you, Dan, and it's great to be back here again. And, tag teaming with Dan Ryan. What better is that? And so thank you again to Sullivan and Worcester for inviting me. And again, Lynn Tokarczyk, Government Tax Incentives Consultant with Business Development Strategies. We are a government tax incentives consulting firm, private consulting firm, and we help companies save cash. So I just want to give you a brief snapshot about my background. I actually used to work for the governor's office. And that's where I was educated on all of the programs, state and local tax incentives. And from there, I was recruited by Ernst & Young to work in close proximity and manage the state and local tax practice, again with Ernst & Young. And then from there, I was trying to enhance my quality of life. So we launched this firm, Business Development Strategies. I don't know where the time has gone. Because we're celebrating our 20th year in business. And it's been a journey. And sometimes you look back and it's, how did I get from there to here and going forward? So again, we're very pleased with the growth of the company. We have, over the past 20 years, we have a team of 10. We have known as a TIF. We'll discuss TIFs. A TIF attorney on our team. We have a CPA. We have a local assessor, which is key. And then all of our other team members are all former state and local government officials. So we're helping companies they're trying to make corporate real estate plans on the commercial side, on the industrial side, so these projects can turn into a reality. And so about our track record, which again, it's about the journey. We've helped companies like Moderna in Norwood 3 times already. And so that's been an exciting project. Millipore Sigma in Burlington, EMD Serrano, Waters Corporation, TripAdvisor, Keurig, Rentschler Biopharma, New England Ice Cream, Watson Marlowe, all types of companies. So Yale Appliance for their recent corporate headquarters and distribution facility. And so we're helping companies, again, they've outgrown their space. They need to expand. They need to create more jobs. We want to keep them in Massachusetts. We don't want them to leave. And so we're working with a lot of, I guess you could say, recession-proof businesses, advanced manufacturing, could be food manufacturing, could be distribution. It could be beverage, climate tech, cybersecurity, AI, distribution. It's all different walks of life. But these are companies that are in the growth sector here in Massachusetts. And, even with some of the uncertainties that we're hearing, that these companies are faced with, our clients are making adjustments. They're making adjustments. They're pivoting. They have customer demands. And so therefore they need to make adjustments. And you'll hear some about the stories. So next slide, please. Oh, that slide. Okay. So as you can see, again, I just mentioned the primary industries on the right. And then so we're helping our clients identify, negotiate, and secure their state and municipal tax incentives. And it's really what we're trying to do. The goal of this program is to help companies offset their project costs. These projects are $20 million projects, $50 million, $100 million and up. And, the price tag keeps going up, especially with the surge in project costs, whether, again, it could be tariffs, it could be inflation, still interest rates are high, construction costs, payroll, it just goes on and on and on. So we try to help companies offset whether it's a $20 million, $50 million, $100 million project costs, to offset it so it can be financially and economically feasible. And this is a great tool for the end user, the tenant, the manufacturer, the life science company, the distribution company. They're benefiting from this program because it's all about real estate tax incentives and some potential state tax credits. However, these are great. This is a great marketing tool for developers to dangle the carrot and, come to my property, this particular community, because we can give you an estimated value prop of what your real estate taxes would be. So, even though it is for the end user, the beneficiary, or the manufacturer or other sector that owns the company, the developers, it's really a great tool. So the project eligibility. So this is the tax incentive program. Again, it's an economic development tool. Now, there's been sweeping changes. This program has been up and running since 1993. However, last year, November of 2024, the Governor's Economic Development Bill, the Mass Leads Act, sweeping changes. The state always was the oversight. They were the administrator of this particular program. And now, as the people are saying, the term is, they got divorced from municipality. The state would, this was a state program, but now state is no longer in the municipal business. So that was a huge, huge change in this particular program. But when we talk about municipal tax incentives, as you'll hear, everything has to go to a town meeting. Everything has to go before select board, finance committee, economic development committee, obviously in cities, to the mayor and city council. So that's where all the heavy lifting is as well, because you need to get the residents, about 200 residents, to show up at a town meeting in support, in favor of these projects, a majority vote. But what type of companies are eligible? Well, companies that plan to relocate from one community to another community here in Massachusetts. They may have plans to renovate a building, an existing building, or an on-site expansion, or obviously putting a shovel in the ground qualifies. The threshold, that question comes up all the time. What size? I would have to say in the estimated 40,000 square feet at least, and up. Because again, the whole idea of the program, as you will hear, it's about bringing new tax revenue to the municipality. So it needs to be something more substantial. And so in a perfect world, it really should be a single occupant building, because you'll hear we're looking for the assessed value of the property to be to increase, to bring new tax revenue. So speaking of new tax revenue, on the right, what is the criteria for companies that are interested in this program in the gold? Well, number one is job creation. And how many new jobs would a company need to create? One new permanent full-time job. Although if you're talking to a city and town, they probably would jump for joy a little higher if they knew that it was going to be more than one job. However, it could be a company retention project, and they may have 100 employees, they may have 200 employees. And so this is a great tool to retain businesses as well as to attract businesses. So number one is job creation requirement under the state laws. Number two is generating new real estate private investment, which equals bringing new tax revenue to the municipality. So that is a requirement, new jobs, new tax revenue coming into the municipality. And that's always where it's like a fine science, taking a look at the property, our assessor, is it going to increase the renovation project? Obviously putting a shovel in the ground, that's going to bring all new tax revenue. So, and then there's other state criteria as well. It's all about timing, location, etc. Now, timing is essential because all of these projects need to be secured by town meeting. And there are some potential state tax credits that I'll mention as well. All of these projects need to be secured, tax incentives, before the company signs a lease or before they close on a property. So when I talk about science projects, that's really where it comes in, because it's trying to line everything. We all know towns meet once a year, annual town meetings once a year. Our clients are like, how does any business get done? meeting once a year. Well, in progressive communities, they may have fall town meetings. I know that we've got some guests here from KP Law who we work with, and we speak so highly of them. We work with them, dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times. So you know that. And so many communities will have fall town meetings, and some of them are still ongoing. And then we always seem to get involved with special town meetings. If it's an important project, we've had town meetings on December 21st. We've had town meetings on February 2nd during the height of snowstorms and on, in the height of vacations. The town managers, as you can imagine, they're like, well, wait a minute. We don't know if we can get a quorum. We need to get like 200 people to attend these town meetings. So anyway, we're always on the team for a positive outcome. However, so timing is essential, because if the company's already signed a lease or they've closed on the property, the residents will say, well, they've already made a commitment. They've already committed to signing a lease or closing on the property. So why do we have to give them a tax deal? They're coming anyway. So the company needs to have leverage. That's the bottom line. So the types of tax incentives that are available are state and municipal. And by the way, all communities on every corner of the Commonwealth has this tool available. Years ago, you might have heard of like alphabet soup, ETAs and EOAs and all of that. No longer, that's all been changed. So it's every community has the ability to offer if the company meets some criteria. And so state tax credits under this particular program. What's interesting about state tax credits, and that was one of the sweeping changes to the governor's economic development bill. So if a manufacturer was interested in applying for this program, they would be eligible to secure a municipal tax incentive in the form of a TIF and this particular EDIP credit. But if it was a manufacturer and they were a registered manufacturer with the Department of Revenue, they would be eligible for a statutory tax incentive. Well, unfortunately, there was no double dipping. You can't access two tax credits. A 3% investment tax credit and another state tax credit. Well, that's all changed as a result of the governor's economic development bill. Now companies can access a manufacturer, the statutory tax credit, as well as a state EDIP credit. Now these are competitive, and there is a cap of 30 million annually. But by the way, this tax credit is also potentially refundable. This is something new and different and huge. And this is really making a difference with companies trying to make decisions to jumpstart. They can access two tax credits and one of them could be refundable. There's also the Mass Life Science Center tax credit. It's a little silo oriented. If you're a life science company, then you would pursue a tax credit with the Massachusetts Life Science Center versus this EDIP credit. So there's, different scenarios and different criteria, but high level, there's like something for everyone, every type of business. And it depends on the number of jobs for this EDIP credit, how many jobs have been created, the location. Gateway municipalities have very, very strong. I know we have this, we were chatting earlier, Epsilon Associates about historic tax credits, usually a lot in the gateway municipalities. So same thing with these tax credits. It could be a more aggressive tax credit coming from a gateway municipality. So that's basically the first bullet. The second bullet is an abandoned building tax deduction available. And this is available to a developer that's making a renovating, or the company renovation. And so it's 10% of the renovation. We all know that a deduction is very different than a credit. We always have to educate companies with that. And so, but it can be very meaningful. The building must be at least 75% vacant for 2 years. And so it's a one-time deduction. So those two are from the state benefits. Now we talk about the municipal real estate tax incentive, a TIF, tax increment financing, which is an increase in the assessed value of the property that's going to generate new taxes. So essentially, it's a discount on future taxes. It's a minimum of 5 years, a maximum of 20 years. In any given year, it could be a 1% exemption or maximum of 100%. Well, of course, everyone would want a 20-year tax deal with 100% exemption, so they'd be paying zero on the new taxes, right? Well, that's in a perfect world. Well, unfortunately, it's not a perfect world. And that's where discussions and negotiations come into play with the municipality, between the company and the municipality. But it can be quite lucrative, especially if there's a shovel going in the ground. That's all new assessed value. Or companies like, example, like Moderna, you know, that was a renovation project, 3 different buildings as an example. And, you know, one of them was the former Polaroid building that was vacant for a number of years. And so it was transformed into a state-of-the-art biomanufacturing facility. So it does work in certain scenarios. We get calls all day long where it does not meet the criteria. You know, someone's buying a building, 100,000 square feet, and the question of the day is, well, how much do you plan to spend to renovate the building? And they'll say, well, $1 million. Well, that's not going to move the needle, according to the assessors. That's not going to increase the value on a 100,000 square foot building. It would need to be more like in the $5 million to $10 million range. We all know that investment doesn't equal assessments. So we pulled an assessor onto our team about 10 years ago, because we would actually call the local assessors and say, okay, this is a scenario, you know, a 200,000 square foot building, shovel in the ground. What would you project the assessed value to be in new taxes? And they'd say, okay, can we get back to you in 6 weeks? No, that doesn't work. You know, our clients want a little bit more predictability. What about, like, you know, 6 hours, or, you know, a couple of days, 24 hours? So we really needed to do that to give the clients that are trying to make these corporate real estate decisions some predictability of, you know, what the taxes would be. And then the 4th bullet is also coming from the municipality personal property tax exemption. Only manufacturers in Massachusetts, as I mentioned, they're pretty much benefiting from the perks of statutory tax credits, and they're 100% exempt if they're a registered manufacturer, 100% exempt from paying municipal personal property taxes. You know, in Massachusetts, every company or property owner receives 2 taxes in at the municipal level, one on real estate, one on personal property. So this is another value add under this particular program. And then the last bullet is not as popular, a special tax assessment, because that impacts the current base of the real estate taxes, the property. And so there's a loss to the municipality, although we've worked with multiple municipalities that are very open to doing this, because they might have a building that's vacant. It's typically for a vacant building scenario, and it could be an eyesore. And there's a great company that wants to, and we worked with a great project up in Leominster. There was a 600,000 square foot building. One of our clients, Affordable Interior Systems, AIS, was looking at the building, had an interest, and a TIF just did not make sense. It really didn't qualify for a TIF, but the city was very interested in attracting them, corporate headquarters, manufacturing facility. And so they offered them a special tax assessment. It was quite lucrative for the company. And so while all this is going on, and, you know, doing value props and everything else, and we do that all day long, we have developers calling us up, well, how much could a tenant save? And so that's something that we do complimentary. You know, we're happy to do that because we have a whole team, and we know many of the cities and towns and what their appetites would be. For that matter, we know all the tax deals that have been in Massachusetts. So the other item is, during this time, we're also doing the economic impact. This is important to the cities and towns. When there's a company that's interested in locating to the community, how much will the company be spending with local service providers and vendors, and how much will the employees be spending? So we also provide that, so that the entire economic impact, as well as their community involvement, that's key to every community is looking for the poster child to locate, you know, a company that's going to be engaged, that they can have a relationship with, that will be community involved, and they should be. So next slide, please. So basically the approval process, while we're educating the local officials. You know, we worked with Analog Devices up in Wilmington and a couple of years ago, and it was their very first tax incentive project. They wanted to construct, you know, over 400,000 square feet of space, but the municipality had never worked on a TIF project before, so it was a lot of educating and making sure that they would embrace it. So then they could share that with the residents when there were like 400 residents that came to a town meeting on a Saturday morning. And so of course it was a positive outcome. And so, again, a tax arrangement on a TIF, tax increment financing, is negotiated between the company and local officials. Once there's a mutual arrangement, then you need a recommendation to town meeting by the select board, or if it's a city mayor, city council. And then if it's a town, it does require a town meeting vote. As you can imagine, when we first start working with our clients, they're sometimes in shock that, is this really the process? You really have to get like 200 residents to attend a meeting and support these programs? Yes. So, you know, it is an interesting, it's not like that in every other state for that matter. So one of the huge changes, so once there's a town meeting approval, we would always have to bring it to the state for their administrative approval. Well, that, as I mentioned, there was sweeping changes, so that is no longer required because of the town meetings in April or so. Then the company would just have to wait month after month after month, the state to approve it, even if the state wasn't even participating. They weren't, you know, they weren't pursuing a state tax credit because they had, you know, the manufacturing tax credit, or they were pursuing the Massachusetts Life Science tax credit. So it was only a TIF, but they still had to wait months. So it's a little more of a streamlined process. And we always have community information sessions in the local municipality. Because if we have 200 residents going to show up at the high school, we want to make sure that they've heard about it. They understand who is the company, what is a TIF, because if they're new to town meeting, the only definition they know of a TIF is a feud between two people. They have no idea it's a financial vehicle. So there's a lot of educating, even with the local officials. So that's, you know, we're very, very sensitive to that. So here's a few success stories here in Massachusetts. Catania Oils, family-owned business. What a great company. They're in Air, Massachusetts. They recently constructed an on-site expansion, manufacturer of edible oils that you just see in your cabinet that you'll probably be using for the holidays. And so this was unheard of, this particular project, because they had been in the town of Air for decades. And, you know, a TIF requires a majority vote. This was a unanimous vote because this company, again, was like the poster child of community involvement, of giving back. Everybody knew who they were. They came in. It was like a movement for Catania Oils at the town meeting. There were like, you know, 45 articles, you know, on the town meeting warrant. Next slide. And so Watson Marlow, Devon's, which is a hot spot. They're up on the Route 2 corridor as well. We've worked on lots of projects up at Devon's, a great community, a great destination for companies to locate there. And this was a shovel in the ground, brand new, 150,000 square foot building and new construction. And it was like $100 million investment. So we were able to secure, you know, millions of dollars in tax incentives. It was a 10-year tax deal. Catania Oils was, you know, about $800,000 tax incentive savings. And Watson Marlow and Catania also benefited from manufacturing tax credits as well. Yale Appliance. Now, this is so great because as we're approaching the holidays, they just opened up a brand new retail store in the town of Norton. But what they did, corporate headquarters and distribution were in Stoughton. They recently relocated, put a shovel in the ground for over 100,000 square feet for their corporate headquarters and distribution now in the town of Norton with the retail outlet. It is unbelievable. It is beautiful. You'll have to stop by there right on 495 going south. And this was like a $20 million project. And, you know, these are projects, you know, when you talk about corporate headquarters, these are the type of projects that cities and towns they will embrace because they feel that they'll create a very strong private-public partnership. So this also was a 10-year tax incentive. As I mentioned, it's a minimum of 5 years, maximum of 20 years, but the average is 10 years. Some are, 15. People just, they look into like a crystal ball and they're like, where am I going to be in 20 years? But sometimes they really can't visualize that. So Air Energy Group, this is a great project. We just assisted them to locate in the city of Brockton, Gateway Municipality. They were in Easton, Mass. They wanted to retain their approximately 60 jobs. This is what it's all about, retaining, job retention, job creation. This was a 7-year TIF. It was like an estimated $22 million project. But the city of Brockton was, I can't say enough wonderful things about the city, the Gateway City of Brockton. And the last project to share is Rexa. Developers, VMD, and actually they might be participating in this session this evening. They're the developer and they purchased acres of land and sold a lot to Rexa. And we assisted the company to negotiate a tax incentive. They are currently in West Bridgewater, shovel in the ground like 2 weeks ago. We're very thrilled to have the Lieutenant Governor attend and many other dignitaries. And I know this was a KP Law project. So we worked very closely with KP Law on this project on the tip side, and then some other items as well. But it was very, very exciting. They're groundbreaking. I say that they're like the anchor because there are other lots available as well. And there's more to come, but it's a great location, 195 South, right near the Route 44 Rotary. So it's a great location. And so these are just some of the projects that we're working on. And I just wanted to share them with you because these are resources. Companies don't know about these programs. We get calls, and my question of the day is, okay, when do you plan on signing a lease? When are you going to close on the property? And they'll say, well, I want to sign a lease in 2 weeks. Okay, that doesn't work. That doesn't give us any time. We need a little bit of time. We're expediters. We know how to cut through red tape. So look forward to connecting with you after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn.
Could I ask a quick,
Please.
burning in my gateway community? What is a gateway community?
A gateway municipality are typically the cities that are under the area median income, a little bit more of the economically distressed communities. So like Fall River, New
Right.
Bedford, Pittsfield, Lower Lawrence, Brockton. Yes, there's 26 in Massachusetts.
Sorry.
No, thank you for the question.
Just one quick one as well. You said something about EOAs. For TIF and EDIP, does it need to be like a blighted area? I remember something way years ago.
Right. Yes, well, remember I said alphabet soup,
Yeah.
ETAs, EOAs, no longer required.
Okay,
That is no longer a requirement. That was changed by the state legislature a few years ago.
gotcha.
So now it can be in any location in a community.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. And to the extent you have any questions, feel free to raise them during the course of this. But so this story really starts in 2018 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And there was significant changes to the tax code, a lot on the corporate side, and there was a lot of new provisions that were added into it. Usually when Congress names things, they always have like jobs or something, like things that are good, like puppies or lollipops or whatever, but they've given up all pretense of doing that now. And so, those of us who do these presentations have to, I think the name of this is pretty embarrassing, to be honest with you, but in any event, there are tax changes and there are some very beneficial provisions in it. One of the main buzzwords is permanence. A lot of the things are now permanent. A lot of things are now indexed for inflation, which is also good. There's a lot of things that you're probably not as interested in that are kind of shiny objects, like no tax on tips and, the deduction for no tax on overtime, deduction for automobile interests and things like that. But since this life, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was passed via reconciliation, there's a lot of sunsetting provisions and things like that, like the no tax on tips ends after 2028. And so the things that have been made permanent, I think, are really going to be helpful in driving economic development. So, this occurred, and this really flew under the radar, to be honest with you, because for months before the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, those of us in the tax industry are super excited that there's going to be changes. And this passed on July. This was signed into law on July 4th, and I can guarantee you that I wasn't thinking about taxes on July 4th. In any event, so the other thing that happened here is energy credits have been severely cut back. So one of the big things that in the Inflation Reduction Act was green energy projects, credits, things like that. That's significantly cut back, especially for wind and solar. So there are some sunsetting provisions on those. And so to the extent there are projects going on or thinking about going on, they have to get done relatively quickly, or else you're going to lose the credits. So just kind of quickly, all the rate reductions from 2018 are now permanent. The standard deduction has been increased. The $750,000 limit on home mortgage interest deduction is permanent. The business and the SALT cap, which you're probably interested in as individually, it goes up to 40,000. But if you make over $600,000 a year jointly, it goes back down to $10,000, and it all goes back to $10,000 anyway for everybody in 2028. So it basically goes way up and then it comes back to where it was in a couple of years. So some of the changes that were made, though, were actually, I think, pretty smart. The 199A deduction, and that gives a deduction for owners of flow-through entities like a partnership or an S corporation. And so when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was enacted, it cut corporate rate down to 21%. And this is meant to put flow-throughs on par with the taxation there. And so what they did is the limitations were phased out. They tied the limitations for the deduction to inflation. So it's going to continue to apply to, it's not going to cut off taxpayers as inflation increases. And you have to materially participate in investors. That hasn't really changed, but what they did do is there were certain professions that are not eligible for this, mainly service providers like lawyers, accountants, things like that. But they allowed a couple other new professions to be eligible for this, and that includes architects and sadly, not attorneys or accountants. This is probably one of the biggest things that happened is bonus depreciation has been made permanent. So the first year you place depreciable property in service, you get a deduction for the permanent amount for all property going back purchase after 2019. So this is good for development, for developers, for a number of reasons, because of what the eligible property includes, interior improvements to non-residential real property. So that's for doing rehabilitation work on major projects, that's across the deduction right off the bat instead of having to depreciate things. And some of the depreciation, as you know, can take a long time. So this applies to all property that has a useful life of under 20 years. I'm not a CPA, but I'm a CPA adjacent, so I'm aware of depreciation schedules and 20-year life. But I've been in meetings with CPAs, and they test each other. What's the useful life of X, or what's the useful life, and they all kind of know that. I don't know what that is, but I know where the answer is. But for the most part, it is things like machinery, office equipment, stuff like that. So it's a good thing for developers because you get an instant deduction. It also, if you're developing residential real estate, you can do that as well, but you have to do a cost segregation study. And things like I live down the street from a cement plant, so I think about this, but concrete would be one of the things that would be eligible for bonus depreciation and other assets that are used in construction. So the hope here is this is going to spur some economic activity by giving an immediate write-off. The only thing to keep in mind is there is recapture provisions. So if you do sell the asset, you will have to, the bonus depreciation is going to be recaptured. It's a little, I think it's a little clunky because you're, instead of just allowing an immediate deduction, it's 100% depreciation in the first year. So I guess the point there is that you do get recaptured if you don't hold the asset. So, but it's a good deal. This is not such a good deal. There is a deduction for energy efficient buildings, and this has kind of been like a big thing in the last few years, maybe going even earlier than that, like five or 10 years. This deduction is eliminated after January or June 30th of next year. So this is kind of what I was saying, that there's going to be some severe cutbacks to the extent you're relying on these types of deductions for your projects or these types of credits, which we'll get to in a second. And so what the other thing that they did, and this has to do with the beginning of construction standard. The IRS issued guidance on this, and this has to do with when an actual project is eligible for your tax credits. So the old standard is it's like beginning significant physical work, which was kind of like a loosey-goosey standard. Or if you put in 5% of the total project cost, then you're eligible once those things are met for these credits. So now for solar and wind facilities, there is no safe harbor that you put down 5%, you're eligible. That doesn't exist anymore. And you must have continuous construction for solar and wind facilities. So what that means is you can't kind of, put some shovel, be in the permitting process, do some digging or whatever, and then stop, or it has to be consistent work on a daily basis before the credits are eliminated. And so this is gonna put pressure on people that are relying on or trying to get involved in solar and wind facilities, because it's really gonna be difficult if you haven't started it yet to get these online before the credits get eliminated. So I guess this is somewhat of a pay for. I mean, this is not a revenue neutral tax bill by far, but this is, I guess, one of the pay fors for it is this credit elimination. Business interest deduction limit. So this is a nice deal too. So the way it's calculated is it used to be 30% of your adjusted taxable income, which was EBIT. So it's been amended, so it's now your income based on EBITDA. So the pool is bigger that you apply the 30% to. So the effect of that is you're going to be able to deduct more business interest starting this year. So again, that's going to encourage debt and hopefully spur some development. For those of you familiar with our firm here, we have a very robust tax practice. I am not involved in that, so I will tread carefully on this next slide. And that is taxable REIT subsidiaries. A REIT could only own 20% of its assets could be stock in a taxable REIT subsidiary. That's been increased to 25%. This has kind of gone back and forth a few times over the years. But what this does is, the bottom line here is, if a real estate investment trust can use a TRS, what they do is they provide services without running into the running afoul of the REIT rules. So real estate investment trusts can have taxable REIT subsidiaries that provide some more services to tenants, for example. So this, again, hopefully will spur some real estate development for buildings that want to have, maybe a gym inside or something like that. And this is the big credit eliminations, what I was talking about. So a lot of people have taken advantage of the tax credits for green energy, whether you get heat pumps and stuff like that. After June 30th, those are all going away. Clean vehicle credit, that's going away. It already has gone away. Manufacturing, production, all these that you can see here, all these credits are essentially eliminated, really scaled back. And so you can see on the deadlines, by the end of 2027, the credits are going to be nearly eliminated. You still can qualify for things like batteries and things like that, large electric storage facilities, but you're really not going to be able to use it for whatever reason. And I think it's because the president doesn't like windmills and solar panels, but the big focus of this is just really eliminating subsidies for windmills and solar panels. So, and one new thing is if foreign entities invest in these projects, the credits, they're no longer eligible for the credit, and the credit, to the extent they have taken it, is going to be recaptured. So, so the lesson here on the credits is that if you want to invest in and you want to qualify the credits, you got to start very soon, because 25 is almost over. You really just have a couple of years to get those projects going, and because of the changes in the standards, you have to have shovels in the ground. You have to be doing the work towards it, or else you're not going to qualify. So this is good for low income housing tax credit. So the state credit ceilings increased 12%. So there's going to be the way this program works, if you don't know, is each state gets an allocation of low income housing tax credits. So the allocations to the states are going to be greater now. And this is permanent change, which is also good. So there's going to be more low income housing tax credits allocated beginning next year. So that is hopefully going to encourage investment in low income housing. And there is a limitation on your ability to claim the credit if you use tax exempt bond financing. That threshold is lowered by half. So what it's going to do is encourage the theory is it's going to encourage more low income housing. So there's going to be more money available, more subsidies available for low income housing as a result of this. So that's certainly a positive benefit here. I include this slide because this is not something a lot of people know about, is Section 1202. And so what Section 1202 does is, if you invest in a C corporation and you hold the stock for 5 years or more, you get up to 10 million of gain excluded from tax. It's, as far as I know, one of only 2 provisions that allow you to have tax-free gain. So that was passed, I want to say during the Clinton administration, so that was quite a while ago now. And it has the thresholds and whatever were not indexed to inflation. So what the amendment did is it increased the gain exclusion to $15 million. And it's now indexed to inflation, and it increased, there's an asset test for the C corporation, the size of it, to make it eligible for these benefits. And that was increased by $25 million from $50 million to $75 million. So this is supposed to be for small businesses, but a small business with up to $75 million in assets is eligible for this. The application for real estate is probably limited because most people don't invest in real estate through C corporations, but it is, if you're going to lease space to startups or whatever, this is certainly something that would encourage. It certainly encourages investments in new startup businesses, because you have to be one of the initial. You have to be kind of an initial investor. It's not, you can't buy it on a publicly traded market or anything like that. So, finally, a topic that I'm very fond of is opportunity zones. This is the other provision in the tax code that gives you tax-free gain. The way it was initially written is it was supposed to end at the end of 2026. And so what it did was, if you had capital gains and you invested those capital gains in opportunity zones, which are low-income census tracts, you'd be able to defer the payment of the capital gains tax. And you'd also get up to a 15% reduction in the capital gains tax. And then when you sold out of the investment, that gain is tax-free with no cap on it. So you could put in $1 in a project and then sell it for $1 billion, and all that gain is tax-free. So what the law did, since it's now permanent, is beginning in 2027, they're going to reset all the zones. And so hopefully, the municipalities and states are thoughtful in how they designate zones, because one of the problems with the program initially is there wasn't a lot. Some cities and some states did a better job than others. Worcester was really good at doing this. So other places like Oakland, California, a place, Orange County, California as well, New York State, Providence, Portland, Maine, places like that. But here in Boston, some of the zones they were designated. My understanding is that the mayor at the time wasn't a fan of it, and they were designated in a way that wouldn't be developed. So if you're familiar with Boston, like Forest Hill Cemetery was an opportunity zone, the Harbor Islands are an opportunity zone. Anyway, that's all going to get reset. And so that's going to be, I think, going to really encourage a lot of investment beginning in January of 2027. When this first came out, our practice group had, it was very busy, and then it kind of petered out as the good projects were eaten up. So it was like, and I promised to tell this joke. So as of now, it's like the turkey the day after Thanksgiving, where there's not a lot of useful opportunity zones, but it's all going to get reset. And there's a couple new things in it, which I think are really interesting. So in order to be an eligible investment, you either have to do new construction, or you basically put in what you paid for it. So if you buy a building for $100, you have to do $100 in improvements. If you invest in a rural opportunity fund, you only have to put in, so you put you put $100 in to buy the property, you only have to put 50% in. So it's a significant reduction. In the rural opportunity zones, there are less than 50,000 residents, which really isn't that small when you think about it. But for some of these projects, what the application here is, housing would be a big one, where there's a need for housing, and data centers and things like that, where there's just not, this is kind of snuck in, I think, and the benefits of doing a rural opportunity fund are tremendous. And I'm interested to see who really wants to jump in on that, because, the amount that you're out of pocket is, half as much as you would be if you were doing it, like, say, here in downtown Boston. So we'll see. I mean, that's kind of we'll see what happens down the road. But, I think that more people are aware of this program now. So I think the governors, mayors, will be more thoughtful in how they designate these things. And I think it's going to spur some new development when it does come in. One of the things that did happen, though, the 15% reduction in your capital gains tax that you pay, that's not there anymore. And so what'll happen is, when you end up having to pay after 5 years, the capital gains tax you deferred, and you pay the tax, the basis for the tax is either the amount of capital gain you invested or the value of the project. So there could be a substantial spread between the two if you buy raw land and you're not finished with your project or whatever. It's just the fair market value is that it's not the same as a fully stabilized building. So there is some opportunity there with the values to significantly reduce what your capital gains tax will be, even though you don't get you even may be able to get more than a 15% reduction, depending on how the values work out. So that kind of tweaked the program a little bit, but and then going forward, 2027, there'll be new zones, 2037, 2047, and so on and so forth. So it's going to go on forever, or at least until it's, until they decide what happens. I think one of the things that is going to be interesting is there's money that has been allocated to the Treasury Department to look at job growth and things like that in the opportunity zones, to see how effective this program is. There wasn't really any of that before, so no one really knows whether it was good, not good. And there may be some further changes to it afterwards, because there's going to be a report on job growth, whether or not the I mean, the goal is to move low-income census tracts out of being low-income census tracts. And so to the extent that it works, then the program's working. To the extent it's not working, then it's going to be more difficult to argue that this is an effective use of taxpayer money. So that's kind of a wait and see, but it should be pretty exciting to see how this all plays out. So this is kind of an additional summary of that. So, this is the takeaway from the federal changes is really the permanence. It's going to be the bonus depreciation, the interest expense, the increased ability to claim business interest expense and opportunity zones. That's the big thing. And then indexing things for inflation is a big deal because most of the time they don't do that in a tax code. It's sort of like the AMT. You end up catching people because the limitation, the threshold for the AMT hadn't changed. So as inflation rises, more and more people have to pay it. What was it fiscally responsible in this? I don't know. We'll see. But there's not a lot of wholesale changes. No one's like super excited about this or whatever, but there are some things, there is some certainty that's baked in because rates have been made the rate changes have been made permanent. A lot of the new things that were added, like opportunity zones, the 198 deduction, that's been made permanent. And bonus depreciation has been made permanent. The interest expense changes have been made permanent. So in a whole, it's not a lot of new things to talk about, but there's things that are permanent and there's benefits in it. So hopefully it'll drive some development and economic activity, being able to expense things right in the first year and being able to incur more debt and deduct more opportunity zones. I think people should look at Section 1202 companies more just because the benefit is really big and the thresholds have changed and everything, and they've been indexed for inflation. So that's kind of the summary of what's going on in this from a kind of a real estate perspective, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. On the bonus depreciation after a cost seg, you talked about a recapture rate if you sell the property. Is there an amount of time you have to hold the property to not trigger the recapture rate?
You'd have to hold it for the useful life.
Useful life.
Yeah.
And then,
But some of it's 5-year property, but then there's like 20-year property.
Yeah.
So
and then on the opportunity zones, you talked about calling them sort of rural if you have 50,000 residents or less, as long as it's not next to an urbanized area.
Yeah.
What's the definition of an urbanized area? Is it just something with more than 50,000 residents?
it's a definition, and I'm sorry, I should have, it's a definition from HUD that I don't have off the top of my head, but it's based on population and a few other metrics. And just for those, like, they have to be, well, two things. One, you get the benefit of the rural opportunity zone now if you invest in an opportunity that happens to be in a rural area, and you don't get the benefit for any rural area. It has to be designated. So after starting in 2027, it has to be designated. The rural area has to be designated as an opportunity zone. Any other questions? Okay, well, that's that. Thank you all for coming. You can enjoy a rare picture of me without a beard, and that's that.
We hope you found it informative and beneficial and some takeaways. So thanks so much for.
Yeah, thanks for coming.